The chamber stank of milk, of the poppy, and old blood. The bed curtains hung heavy as sea-wet sails, and behind them the king rasped, each breath a weary man climbing a cliff he could no longer see. Eddard Stark stood with the sealed parchment in his hand and the pommel of his sword below his other, thumb resting against cool, familiar metal. The wax at the parchment's mouth caught a candle's light and glowed like an ember. He could feel the heat of it, though it was cold, as if the thing were a coal he ought to cast into a brazier and be done. Robert's eyes fluttered. "You'll set it right," he breathed, humor a ghost in his voice, the old brashness worn down by pain until it was almost gentle. "Gods, what a mess I've made." "You gave the realm peace for 15 years, Ned said. He wanted it to be true enough to be a kindness. He wanted so many things that were too late. Robert's hand found his sleeve with a strength that surprised him. "Do what you must. Promise me, Ned." He thought of promises made in a tower where the air tasted of dust and roses. He knew the shape of promises that cut like knives. "I will," he said, because he could not be other than he was. Renly Baratheon waited for him outside the bedchamber with a lean impatience in his face. A boy's handsome made a man's mask. "You know what has to be done," Renly said, low and quick. "She'll move the moment his eyes close. We must move first. Give me 100 good men, and I'll take the boy and the queen before the sun is up." Ned heard the words and saw the blood they would spill. Saw blades bared in a nursery room. Saw fear in a child's mouth and a mother's scream. He had refused before, yet the door behind him held a dying man's last request, and beyond the other door waited Cersei Lannister with her soft smile and iron spine, and Peter with his gray-green eyes, and Varys with his whispers that clung like cobwebs. The city was a barrel of oil with a spark in every corner. "Not to kill them," Renly urged, reading the old hesitation in him. "To hold them. We don't have to be villains. But we can't be fools." A gust from the open window carried the salt stink of Blackwater Bay and the distant clatter of armor from the yard. A gull balanced on a crenel, its eye like a bead of onyx, unblinking. Ned thought of Sansa and Arya. He had placed a swordmaster in front of one and kindness in front of the other, and both felt like spider silk against a storm. "Make it 50. The words surprised him with their hardness. "No blood if it can be avoided. We will hold them under the king's seal until succession is settled. If there is to be war, let the first blood be mine before theirs." Renly's mouth thinned, then curved. "I'll take what I can get." "Do it at dawn," Ned said. He had always loved dawn. In winter, it came late enough to be treasured and lit the snow from within. "I have letters to send." He wrote by lamplight until lines fattened and swam. To Stannis, the realm's law and the nature of bastardy, and a quiet plea that was not written in ink. "Be better than a sword, be the stone that holds a wall." To Winterfell, gather the harvest that remains, close the wolf gates, bring in the hill shepherds. To White Harbor, a letter in his own hand to Wyman Manderley. Readiness of ships and storing of grain and discreet passage for precious cargo. He wrote to his brother by oil and raven and to his dead sister in his heart. He wrote until the king's breath stopped, and the silent thing that passed at last from the bed moved through the room and out the window and away over the dark water like a bird. Dawn came thin and fish-bellied, the sky a bitter color. Ned went to the September and knelt beneath painted glass. His prayer was not for victory. It had been long since he trusted in victories. He asked only for enough time to make fewer mistakes than he already had. Then he buckled on his sword and took the sealed parchment, and walked toward Maegor's Holdfast, where Renly's men were supposed to be shadows in the corridors and quiet hands on doors. He saw the first sign in the faces of the servants lingering where servants did not linger. He saw the second in a patch of wet on the flagstones where no rain had fallen, and he smelled the third in the iron that hangs after a slaughter. By the time he reached the inner ward, he saw the fourth with his eyes. A dozen of Renly's household guards scattered like spilled linen across the stones. One still alive and trying to stitch his guts back in with shaking hands. "They knew," the man gasped when he saw Ned, a smile fixed to his face by shock. "They knew we were coming." "Who told them?" one of Ned's men breathed. "Does it matter?" Ned asked. He knelt and put his hand over the dying man's. "There is a warmth to human touch that is a miracle as much as any god's blessing. Forgive us," he said, to this stranger and perhaps to more. He did not see Renly. Later he would hear that Renly had fled with his Rainbow Knight and a handful of men, slipping out the river gate under a fog that came too conveniently, whether by weather or whim. Ned turned for the Tower of the Hand. He meant to gather his household, his daughters, and what remained of their safety. He reached the door and found it held by Janos Slint in a double line of city watchmen with halberds at the slope of their shoulders, eyes like coins. Peter stood just behind them, smiling that smile that never reached his eyes. "My lord," Peter said, as if they were at a supper party and something witty had just been said. "Ashamed to be on the wrong side of a door. There are so many doors in this city." The watch parted to let a Kingsguard through, white scales gleaming. Marin Trant's face had the dull look of a man who had never loved anything not himself. Behind him a girl's cry rose and cut, high as a gull, then turned to a feral sound that made Ned's heart stop. He knew it as sure. Ly as he knew the sound of his boots in snow. He moved without thought, but 3 halberds came up, and Janos Slint shook his head as a man might to deny a favor. "You are under arrest by royal decree," Slint said, and it would have been laughable if not for the blood on his sleeve. "By whose royal decree?" Ned asked. He had never been good at this game, but sometimes the only thing left was a question. "By the king's," Janos said and smiled. "His Grace Joffrey Baratheon." "You mean Lannister," Ned said, and Peter's expression flickered, quick as a fish. He gauged them and saw the weight, and he did not draw his sword at last because he was no good to his children dead on the floor. "I wish you joy of the king you serve," he told Janos, voice even. "May his reign be as long as his mercy." They took his men's blades and bound their hands. They did not bind his, and Peter, at least, had the grace to see the insult there. "You should have trusted me," Peter murmured, coming close enough that Ned could feel the wine on his breath. "All it would have taken is one tender word. I trusted you enough to keep my children away from you," Ned said, and turned his back because it was the only weapon left at hand. They brought him to the throne room where Cersei waited with her boy upon the iron seat. The crown did not fit the boy's head, which made of it a joke and a threat at once. The queen was all composed grief and shining hair, and the lords around her tasted the air and found it sweet. Ned remembered Robert as a great, laughing bear carrying his mail like a cloak, and he felt suddenly as tired as if every year he had ever lived had settled on his bones at once. Cersei spoke, the words as smooth as oil. Ned did not answer to them. He set the sealed parchment on the floor and crushed it under his boot until wax and paper gave with a little sigh. "That is the end of that," he said. Peter's eyebrow inched up. "How noble," he murmured. Ned addressed the room not as a supplicant, but as a man opening his gate at first snow. "I will not draw steel in this hall. I will not say what every man here knows about the seed and the harvest. You will do as you will because you can. I ask only for safe passage to White Harbor with my household. House Stark will go home. We will answer no summons and send no ravens south of the neck. We will swear no oaths and ask none. Winter is near. The North will keep its own counsel." The room hummed like a hive kicked from its stand. Varys lowered his eyes, a gesture that might have been prayer or cunning. Cersei's smile thinned until it cut. "You speak treason," she said. "I speak necessity," Ned answered. "Call it what you please." He thought then that they would kill him there, for the good of the realm, with the realm meaning whatever they desired it to mean. He would die as he had lived, standing, and that, at least, would be clean. But the queen measured and did not strike. Hostages were gold. Swords in scabbards had their uses. "Take him to his rooms," she said. "Confine him there. See that he is treated as befits his rank." She paused just long enough to place another stone. "Bring me his daughters." They had misunderstood him. Janos Slint took 3 steps, and a boy with straw hair ran in from the colonnade as if life itself were the hunter at his back. His name was Lami or Taber or some such. He was one of the boys Yoren dragged up from gutters to give the wall. The boy's breath tore his throat and his eyes were white in his face. "The little one," he gasped to Yoren, to Ned, to anyone. "She bit me and ran. The dancing master's on the floor and there's men and I don't." "Take him," Janos said, annoyed, and they did. But the shape of the morning had shifted. Arya was in the walls like a ferret. Sansa was not. When they brought Sansa in, she was as composed as her mother would have been. Her hands trembled like leaves in a wind one cannot see. Cersei put a hand on the girl's shoulder and smiled as kindly as a winter moon. "You will write to your sister," she told Sansa. "Tell her how foolish games end. Invite her to be obedient. Girls should be obedient." Ned looked at his daughter and held her eyes, and she looked back, trapped but not broken. She was still a child, and yet the thing in her gaze was older than she knew. He wanted to say 100 things to her. That he was sorry, that he was proud, that he was not very good at this and the world had asked too much of him and now it was asking more of her. There was no room for any of those words, so he said the one thing he thought could help and would not be used against her. "Remember who you are," he said. She nodded once. Cersei's hand tightened on her shoulder like a collar. They confined him to the Tower of the Hand with 6 watchers at all times and Peter visiting with wine that might have been innocuous or not. He poured for himself and let Ned pour for himself, the polite cruelty of it almost artful. "You wreck me," Peter said, settling onto a window seat. "Do you know that? You are so dreadfully what you look like that it makes the rest of us feel shabby. I suppose there is a kind of selfishness in it at last. All that honor. It leaves less air for everyone else." "You mistake me," Ned said. "I have done dishonorable things and will do more, I think. But I am too old to learn to like the taste." Peter sipped. "You will not live long enough to change your palate." He studied the sky. "The Queen thinks you a fool for destroying the paper. The Spider thinks you a fool for not trying to seize the boy. I think you a fool for staying." Ned did not answer. He counted the hours by the movement of light across the stone of the window embrasure. Varys came that night, smelling of cloves and old parchment, carrying a candle cupped in his hand. "Your dancing master is dead," he said quietly. "Your younger daughter is not. She has a needle in her hand and a dog's hunger. She's clever, but clever children die as easily as dull ones." He paused to let him feel that. "I can get her out by a postern. I can get you out with her. The elder girl is... I cannot pry her free without breaking her." "Do not break her," Ned said, "because there were things one did not do, not only because they were wrong, but because once done they could never be made undone." He closed his eyes, opened them. "Get Arya out," he said. "If you can get me as well, do it. If you cannot, save her. The rest, I will make do." "You will not," Varys said, and his voice, for a moment, was not smooth. "But it will be what it is." They came when the moon was half and high, and the city was all the sounds of a great beast sleeping uneasily. The postern stank of tide muck and the breaths of men who waited too long in dark places. Arya was smaller than he remembered her ever being, skinny as a shaft of marsh grass, eyes huge with a kind of wild light that made his throat hurt. She pressed herself against him for a heartbeat and then pushed away. "Sansa," she began. "I know," he said. He almost said he would come back for the elder, that everything would be set right, that fathers were stronger than tides, but he had promised himself he would not lie to his children except where a lie would save them. "We will go home," he said instead, each word a plank laid over a chasm. "We will go home and wait. We will be made strong. Your sister will need a place to come to when she can." Varys got them to an oared boat with his silent men as shadows. The water was ink with a sheen of starlight. "There is a ship that owes me," he murmured. "Names are coined some days. This one is ours. She will be to White Harbor in 2 weeks if the winds are kind." He looked at Ned. "If you write to the Queen from the sea, tell her you wish her to think you drowned. If she believes you in her net, she will tug at it daily. If she believes you a ghost, she may be less attentive." "I will not write to the Queen," Ned said. I will write to those who will listen." He looked back toward the black mass of the city and thought of Sansa. Small on a dais, soft hands clenched, listening because that is what girls do when men around them make iron noises with their mouths. "Forgive me," he said under his breath. He did not know to whom. The oars bit the water. The city slid away. They made White Harbor with the wind at their back and two storms that came and went quickly, as if even the weather were wary of pursuing them too far. Arya threw her meals to the fish for 3 days and then found her sea legs and prowled the deck with the battered practice sword Syrio had placed in her small hand, as though holding that thin line of steel stitched him back into the world. Ned sat with his cloak tight around him and counted gulls. He wrote letters that would travel faster than he did. He slept badly and woke with his hand on the sword he had not needed to draw. Wyman Manderly came to greet them in the mists of morning that clung over the harbor like wool. He was a mountain of a man, the sort that could fold a greeting over a threat and make both sound like hospitality. He bowed more deeply than some lords would to a king, which told Ned all he needed about Wyman's measure of danger and opportunity. "My Lord of Winterfell," Wyman said, which was not a title but an anchor. "White Harbor is, and remains, your port." "I did not come as a conqueror or a supplicant," Ned said, as they walked through the damp stone ways where fishwives called to one another and children ran like cats. "I came as a man with a child and a declaration." Wyman's lips smoothed into something like a smile. "If you declare war, I am provisioned for it," he said. "If you declare winter, I have salt stores sufficient to keep bellies quiet. If you declare anything else, you will find me a careful student." He tilted his head. "I hear the South already declares you a traitor." "They always did, some of them," Ned answered, and found a tired humor in it. They held council in a round tower with windows that looked onto the royal of the harbor. Arya had fallen asleep on a bench with a dog for a pillow, though no one remembered the dog boarding the ship. Animals come where noise promises flesh. Wyman sent his heir, Wylus, to see to tar and shipbread and ravens. Lords from smaller houses came and went, faces like rough-hewn beams, voices like lumber sledges. Manderly's factor spoke long and well about salt and grain and barrels. Ned listened until he had enough in his head to see the size of the thing he meant to try. "I will call my banners," he said at last, standing because it was easier to carry a burden upright than hunched. "I will ask them to come to Winterfell not for a campaign, but for a council. I will tell them that my oath to the Iron Throne is broken. The North will be its own until the snows melt from the wall to the barrows. If any would not stand with me, they may go south under truce and take their chances with the lions." There was a murmur like thunder felt through stone. Some were moved by old memories older than their grandsires, when kings of winter had worn antler and fur and paid no heed to courts below the neck. Some were moved by the tally of Lannister wrongs. Some were moved by hunger and the feeling of a rope they could keep from their necks. Motivation was less important to him than motion. Wyman Manderly placed his broad hands on the table as if on a lover's shoulders. "Say the word," he said. "We will feed those who come, and we will make White Harbor a place no golden ship will leave again without our leave." Ned sent his ravens. He sent to the Umbers and Karstarks, to the mountain clans who prized pride as if it were iron, to the Glovers and the Tall Hearts and the Mormonts with their bare banners and their iron women. He sent to Deepwood and Barrowton, and Last Hearth. He sent a very careful letter to the Dreadfort, where men wore smiles like knives. He wrote to Catelyn at Riverrun, where her father's veins were failing like spring brooks in a drought, and told her what he meant to do and why, and asked her to come home if she could, and if she could not, to send him a prayer. He wrote to Sansa and told her nothing of his plans because letters were nets and he would not toss his child to any more. He wrote instead of Winterfell's kitchens and the taste of meat pies and the sound ice makes when it breaks under the first step into the Godswood pool. He wrote of things she could hold in her mind when the world became a shape that did not want her in it. The road to Winterfell was a ribbon of thaw and frost. He made it in a litter because his last fall on the stairs of the Red Keep had left a stiffness that horseflesh made worse, and he hated that, but he hated the thought of failing before he began more. The small folk came to the roadside to watch, with the quiet eyes of people practicing their own form of politics. The politics of not starving, the art of not being noticed. They doffed caps as he passed, and a girl threw a wreath of pine and winterberries that landed across Arya's lap, and she wore it like a crown until the dog ate half the berries and was sick. Winterfell's towers rose through a blush of frost haze like old teeth in an aged jaw. The smell of wood smoke, the sound of water under ice in the hot pools, the particular way the wind tunneled around the square tower and sang. These were a balm he had not known he needed until he had them again. Robb came down the steps with his hair wind-tossed and his face a study of all the emotions a young man tries to master and fails because they race each other too quickly across him. He loved his son for that. They embraced like men who had both almost drowned and were surprised to find they had lungs still. "You left Sansa," Robb began, and his voice broke on the name. "I did not leave her," Ned said. It was a distinction only in the soul, but it mattered to him. "I could not bring her. I brought Arya. We will have to be enough for now." Robb nodded, gulped air, nodded again as if that could make a shape of things that did not have one. Arya gathered to him for a moment, then slipped away with a gracelessness he found dear as any courtly courtesy. She went to find the wolf he knew would not be far. The wolves had come home as if the land itself had called them. The lords came like crows to carrion or like kin to a wedding, depending on the man who watched them. The Great John came with horses that looked like mountains and men who looked like trees. Galbart Glover came with a unit that marched like a single thing because he cared about such matters. Donella Hornwood came with her banner held high over a face that looked as if smiling had never been the most important part of her life and had always been near second. Even the Boltons sent men, and their lord came himself, eyes half-lidded, polite as a cat. They crammed into the great hall and heated the air with breath and argument. The old gods watched or did not watch from the trees. He felt them the way he had as a boy, not as presences but as absence with edges. He spoke when the time for speaking came, his words measured because care itself can be a kind of courage. "The Iron Throne has my daughter," he said, "and will use her to pull me by the throat, if I let them. The Lannisters will do what they always do. The Riverlands bleed under them now. I will go south with swords because blood calls to blood. But I will not bend knee again to a chair made of other men's broken steel, nor will I ask any man here to do so. If we go not as a host at a king's command, but as a people defending our own. The North has its own winter to prepare for. We cannot be drawn into every quarrel born of summer vanity." The Great John laughed, great and full, more honest than half the prayers in the world. "Speak plain, Stark," he boomed. "This is good mead, but I'd not drown in it. If you mean to make yourself king, wear the crown on your own head and stop holding it like a fish you mean to throw back." "I mean to do what is needful," Ned said. "If you require a word, take 'free' as the word and do with it what you will." The hall surged like a sea. No one wanted to be first. Everyone wanted to be last but one. It was Wyman Manderly, clever as to gold and slow as to anger, who stood and bent his big knee and placed a hand over his heart with a showman's flourish that looked well on him. "There have been kings in the North before," he said, his voice filling the rafters. "If there will be again, better a man who thinks of winter first and glory last." He paused, and the pause was a fisherman letting line play. "For my ships and my city and my sons, I will follow Eddard Stark, whether he names himself lord or king." Roderick Castle's mustache quivered as if at a joke only he heard. The Great John threw back his head and shouted like a man calling the hounds out. One by one, awkwardly or with pomp, with tears or with oaths, the lords bent and made of themselves a tide. Ned's mouth tasted like iron. He lifted his hands because that was what they saw when they looked at him. He had discovered young that sometimes a man is not allowed to be as small as he feels. "If I accept a crown," he said, and the words were a weight he felt in shoulder and gut. "It is not to strut, but to bind. If I am to be king, I am king for the winter and the wolves. I am king for the wall above us and the ground beneath our feet. If I forget that, take it from me and give it to the next man who remembers. So then, for the time it takes to see winter through and our children into spring, I am king of these lands and none others, and I hold this crown as a father holds a child, to protect it, not to use it as a cudgel." They cheered. Some. Cheered because they felt true pride rise in them, as old and cold and bright as frost. Some because others were watching. Some for both. Arya looked at him from the shadows with an expression that was not joy and not derision, and somehow both. She would grow into a woman other men would find difficult to define, and he was glad. He slept badly that night and dreamed of a white sword sticking from frozen ground and a woman's laugh that turned to coughing. In the morning he began to gather an army. It is remarkable how fast men can be turned from farmers and foresters into a host if you are willing to do it badly. Ned would not do it badly. He sent Galbart to train companies and made the Umber men promise to form ranks now and again even if it bored them. He ordered the Manderley fleet to patrol the Bight and chase off any ship whose master carried a golden lion in his purse. He put roving companies on the King's Road to keep it from becoming a bandit's highway. He sent letters to the mountain clans that offered them respect without demands, which was a kind of poetry they understood. He sent a quiet man with a limp to the Dreadfort to look at what could be seen and listen for what could be heard in the twitch of a lord's fingers and the cut of beef on his plate. Men came with old steel and mended harness and banners their grandmothers had stitched. They came because men always come to the beating of a drum, even if no one knows who began to beat it. He had Robb at his shoulder more than at his back, which made him proud. The boy had a way with men. They wanted to stand near him. That is a gift and a danger. Ned told him that. Robb flushed and nodded, and the next day was found in the yard getting his forearm bruised by a master-at-arms 3 times his age, which was the best answer Ned could have asked. Catelyn came as the river broke into green and brown at the edges, bringing with her the river on her in smell and grief around her eyes. She touched him as if to make sure he was not a trick of weather and then pulled back to look for her daughters. She gathered Arya with a breath that was half a sob. They held each other until the hurt of it turned to a kind of comfort, and then they were still. "Sansa?" she asked at last, the question written in the lines of her face already. "They have her," Ned said. "Alive. Cersei is not careless with coin, and hostages are coin." "She will be married before winter," Catelyn said, "to a boy king with a sword for a conscience." She set her palm flat on the table as if to hold herself to earth. "Then we go and bring her back." "We go," Ned said, "but not alone, and not as petitioners." Ravens had been arriving like snow. Stannis, in letters as sharp-edged as his jaw, accused the queen of her crimes and named himself king by right of law, which made Ned like him more and wish him somewhere else. Renly, wrapped in roses and confidence, named himself king by right of fruitfulness, which made Ned fear for him. Beauty is a poor shield. Tywin Lannister moved his armies into the Riverlands with the same slow sense of inevitability with which seasons change. Jaime Lannister turned the fields of the Trident into his own training yard and smiled while he did it. The Vale remained quiet and distant, the area a high island in a cold sky, Lysa's letters full of old wounds and new paranoias. The Iron Islands sent no message because they were deciding, which was what they always did until they could move like a knife while decent men were looking elsewhere. Ned called his host and set it moving, and the North answered him like a frozen thing stirred to wakefulness. They crossed the neck slowly because you should cross a neck slowly. There are places in it where the earth will swallow a horse without bothering to tell you why. The Crannogmen appeared and vanished like seals. Howland Reed came into his tent with reed cloak dripping in eyes like bright stones, and they clasped arms and spoke in a language older than the one their lords used when they quarreled. Reed promised guides and warnings and the use of the swamps as an old friend lends you a coat in sudden rain. He asked nothing in return but that Ned remember the last promise he had made to a sister whose hair had held a light like frost. Ned said he remembered, and he did, and he hated that memory had to be a weapon as well as a comfort. They came to the twins because everyone must who would go that way. The crossing lord greeted them with the particular smile of a man who owns a bridge over a river and feels it in his bones the way a miser feels his hoard under his bed. He offered them stale bread and fresh conditions and a dozen sons and daughters as if they were sheep he meant to trade. Ned listened. He treated the old man as if he were younger than he was and more respected than he had ever been, which cost him nothing and bought more than gold might. Pride is a currency in such houses. He promised that a Stark would take a Fry as squire and foster, that other Freys would ride in honor in the van, that Fry goods would have certain freedoms at White Harbor for a turning of the seasons. He did not promise marriages because those were coins he had learned to count carefully. Walder Fry smacked his lips on the bargain as if fat dripped from its side. They passed over the bridge singing because men often sing when they cross things and imagine it makes them part of the thing crossed. The riverlands were a bruise. Smoke hung under the sky like a low ceiling. Fields that had held barley lay bare as if giants had licked them clean. They found a village burned to the foundations and a woman sitting on a stone with a child in her lap that had been dead long enough to look asleep. Ned knelt and spoke to her in plain words that did not try to order the world back into sense. Sometimes the only thing to give is attention. He left men behind to bury the child and to fetch from the stores White Harbor had sent along. He did what he could, which is never enough. The Blackfish came into their camp with mail wet and eyes dry. He had the look of men who have tried to hold back a river with a spear. Jaime Lannister is making a game of riding circles around our boys, he said, not even bothering to dress it as politics. If someone does not knock him off his horse, he will plant the Lannister flag in the bedchamber at Riverrun. Robb stood to attention merely because a man he respected had entered. The Blackfish saw him and hid a certain softness behind a curl of the lip, which was his way of showing approval. They bent over a rough map together and pushed stones around with their fingertips. "He wants Edmure to chase him," Brynden said. "He does it nicely because he likes to be liked even when he is killing you. But he wants our host to break and run after a fox into a snare." "Then we will not be foxhounds," Ned said. "We will be wolves. We will let him think we are too hungry to be clever. We will send Roose Bolton to hold Tywin's attention at the ford with enough men to be interesting and not enough to win. Meanwhile, we take our best riders with the boys' light feet under them and circle through the woods to his rear, not to charge his banners, to cut his retreat." Roose Bolton blinked slowly, as if he had not expected to be asked to do anything more than bleed. "That will cost me men," he said, as if asking the price at a market stall. "It will cost us all men," Ned answered him, as if they were discussing what color to paint a gate. He looked at Robb. "You will ride with the Blackfish. You will hold yourself in hand as if you held a reins in your mouth. You will not break and run for the lion no matter how his tail swishes. If he turns and offers you his throat, you will cut it so clean he does not have time to be surprised. Then you will take him alive if the gods have mercy, or dead if they have none. I would prefer him alive because I know what you may not. Sometimes a man's life can hold a realm in place." Robb nodded and then realized he had nodded and looked at himself with a kind of wonder, which made Ned want to laugh and then made him want to weep. He did neither because he had found there were times in life you could do neither if you wanted other men to keep their spines. They did as planned because that is what plans are for, and because plans often work until they meet the first man who did not get the letter. At the ford, the Bolton men stood and made a show of wanting to be elsewhere and bled handsomely and drew Tywin Lannister like a moth. In the Whispering Wood, they moved like a rumor through trees and grass. Robb's horse took a branch across the cheek and did not shy. The Blackfish grinned a shark's grin when he saw the lion's tail where he wanted it. They simply closed the door and did not say anything clever about it. Jaime Lannister fought like a man who enjoyed the attention of every eye in the world. He glittered and his sword made music, and it did him no good at all. A man of Robb's age named Darry slid under his guard and caught his arm, and another took his knee, and another put a blade to his throat, and the famous knight went very still because life is a bomb most men love more than reputation. Robb dismounted and came to him, and they were two golden boys from different winter stories, looking at one another across a small, hot space where breath smoked. "My lord," Robb said. "My prince," Jaime returned softly, and Robb did not rise to the bait because he did not know enough yet to see the hook, and sometimes ignorance is a better shield than pride. They took the Kingslayer bound, and they took 100 good captains besides, and a wagon train of arms and cheeses and rumors. They took their tiredness to Riverrun and turned it into a feast because men need to eat joy when it is set before them or they forget how later. Caitlin kissed Rob's brow as if he were 5 again and woke from a bad dream. She kissed Ned like a woman who had lost a thing and found it out on the step one morning with dew on it. Tywin Lannister did not rage. He did not throw cups. He did not chew meat with unnecessary force. He adjusted. He dug his men in and made his camp a fortress where food went in and men did not leak out. He sent messages like knives hidden in loaves of bread. He set a price in his heart for his son and decided he would not pay it with coin but with other men's blood. He wanted, most of all, to force someone else to be the man who bent. Stannis sent a letter that was not a letter but a judgment. Recognize the crown he had taken for himself, support the war he would conduct on the Queen's incest, bring the North into the law's fold. Ned read it twice. He had thought once that if he ever found a man who saw the world as he did, straight lines and the quiet courage of doing the dull thing because it was right, he would find solace in that. He found instead a kind of ache. He wrote back with respect and made of respect a wall. He promised that the North would not war against Stannis so long as Stannis did not war against the North. He promised that any who tried to cross the neck to harm Stannis would find their horses bogged and their throats bogged as well. He did not bend his new forged crown to another man's, and he knew as he sealed the letter that it would make Stannis love him less. Renly's bird came on green ribbon. It said nothing of use because it was all use and nothing else. Marriage offers and elaborate courtesies and an invitation to a summer that did not exist anymore. Ned sent back a polite refusal and wished he were a man who liked gardens. In King's Landing, Sansa sat in a chair gilded until it did not need to be bought twice. Hands folded so tightly her knuckles took the color of bone. The Queen paraded ladies past her like dresses she might wear later. Joffrey had me, and beaten in front of her, not because he loved pain but because he loved watching eyes. Sansa learned to make her face a wall. She wrote letters that were cut to pieces by the Master of Whisperers before they reached anyone's hands. She learned where one could stand in the sept and hear more than one was meant to. She learned where a servant girl might hide bread for a boy half-starved without anyone taking notice. She learned the art of living like one learns a song, by listening until your mouth knows the tune. Arya learned different things. She learned where the dry bits of wood hid under wet. She learned the sound of a gate's lock from the sound of a man's sleep. She learned that you can make a friend of a butcher if you are willing to stand in blood up to your ankle and lift your end of the carcass. She learned that a dog who will not eat from your hand will sometimes let you sleep against him because dogs respect sleep. She came to love the sight of smoke that was only smoke and not a village dying. She grew an inch and some change. She stopped tripping on her own feet. The war in the south, the bright one with pennons and horns, rolled on as they always have, as if none before had ended badly. Stannis and Renly made plays at being king with different music. The Tyrells chose Bloom over Thorn and smiled. The Lannister men laughed when they won and grew quiet when they did not. And the Queen in the city learned she had less power over her father than she loved to think. It was all very grand and would have made a fine song if it had not been for the bruises it left on the people who had no banners. Above it all, on a wall that was not made to keep men out but to keep the world from spilling itself stupidly into the dark, Jon Snow learned to be useful. He learned to mend. He learned to lead men who were not led by glory but by the need to sleep at night without a blade at their throats. He learned the color of snow when it wants to swallow you and the whistle of a wind that has forgotten it must breathe. He sent letters south that smelled of lamp tallow and leather, and Ned read them as if they were scripture. There were things moving in the woods that did not care about oaths. There were fires where no men sat and eyes in trees that were not owls. There were dead who did not lie quiet. It was not yet a tale so dire as to draw the eyes of lords, but it was the beginning of one. News came to White Harbor of longships like knife blades on the water. Ned had known it would. Balon Greyjoy had a mind like a rock in a storm. Reeving on the coasts is the closest thing those men have to prayer. He sent word to his captains and had them ready traps of chain and fire and good iron in the wave roads they knew better than anyone. He did not send Theon to treat with his father, because Theon was a boy who had not decided yet whether the word father meant love or longing or shame. He sat Theon down instead and told him the truth. You have a good mind for mischief and women look at you as if you were a song. he said, not unkindly. You can be the knife a man keeps at his boot or the brother he keeps at his hearth. Decide. I will not decide for you anymore. You lived under my roof. That does not make you my son. You ate at my table. That does not make you my enemy. It makes you a man grown who can say which way he goes. Theon laughed because there was iron under his laugh that had nothing to do with courage. If I am a knife, Lord, you put a hilt on me and used me long. Do not pretend you do not know the feel of it. I know, Ned said. I will not pretend anything to you. I will also not beg. If you want to go to your father, I will give you a horse and a letter and a guard. If you want to stay, you will work and be judged and praised as any man here. Choose. Theon did not choose right away, which was a kind of choice. He slept with a fishmonger's daughter and drank more than he should and came to the yard at dawn and swung a sword until his wrist sang. He watched Robb with an expression like envy and like love. He watched the harbor and counted the sails and knew, as men from the sea always know, that ships are promises. One morning he came in with blood on his sleeve that was not his and dropped a piece of broken or onto Ned's table. I put a fire under a Greyjoy pin, he said, the words clumsy in his mouth as if they were new to him. I am not sure what I am yet. For now I am yours. For now is enough, Ned said, because sometimes it is. They held Riverrun against Lannister for longer than anyone who loved a simple story would have liked. Tywin would faint and the North would answer. Wintermen died in fields far from their home, and their names went into ledgers so that someone would speak them when the fall harvest was in and the first snows came and men sat close to the fire. Catelyn tended to the sick because she could not sit idle and watch fear do to men what swords had not. And she spoke in quiet to lords who had been boys she had known and helped them remember that they were not only lords. She wrote to Lysa and received back letters that were all walls. She wrote to Sansa and received nothing at all, which was a wall of a different sort. Ned brought Jaime Lannister out once a day to sit under guard and look at the river. He treated him as a man even while he kept him like an animal, and that was a line that ran along the edge of a cliff. You think I want you to beg? Ned said. One afternoon when the world lay bright and the water sounded like laughter if you did not listen too hard. I think you want me to be less than you, Jaime said, smiling because he could not help it, because smiling for him was the edge he knew how to hold. Everyone does. It is very boring. Ned almost laughed because the boy man was correct about at least that. I want you to be the weight that brings your father to a table he does not wish to sit at, he said. And when you are that, I will trade you like flour for salt. Jaime considered him. My lady sister will burn half the city before she lets me be weighed. Then she will burn half the city, Ned said. I will try to keep a fire break. In the end, Stannis and Renly clashed without him, as great men often do when lesser men might have helped keep their swords in their sheaths. Renly died under a tent more finely sewn than some temples. Stannis took his ships and his fires to a black water and failed in a way that taught him, which is the only useful way to fail. The Tyrells married themselves to the throne as they had meant to all along, in King's Landing filled with the smell of roses and rot. Joffrey preened and cut a pie and laughed at the screams of something small inside it. Sansa sat and watched and learned where the knives were, not only the ones with edges. Tywin, in his good money patience, finally wrote to Ned and suggested they speak. He did not ask, he did not offer. He said, a meeting at a neutral place, attended by suitable men, about pragmatic things. Ned read the letter with his mind as much as his eyes and sent back. Yes, they chose the Miller's Field where 3 roads met, because such places can be left without shame if need demands. They came with their chosen seats and their chosen faces. Tywin removed his glove finger by finger and set it on the table as if it were a chess piece. He looked at Ned Stark as if at a problem he had not expected to be interested in. You have my son, he said. You have my daughter, Ned answered. A poor trade either way, Tywin said after a heartbeat, and the ghost of humor was there, which meant the ghost of hope might be also. You are a king now, I hear. How very northern of you. Ned did not bother to play insulted. We are what we needed to be. My men did not need to bend. They needed to stand. Tywin threaded the fingers of his hands together and rested them before him like a careful trap. "I will give you this," he said. "You do not fester as some do. You do not lie grease on a thing. You are what you are. It is almost refreshing. Refresh yourself by letting me have my child," Ned said. Tywin's eyes narrowed by a hair. "You may find," he murmured, "that my grandson is very fond of her. It is a hold on you. You understand that, of course." "I understand," Ned said, "that I will wait a long time if I must. I will keep your son alive and well-fed and clean. I will make sure he has exercise and conversation. I will keep him that way until my daughter walks home. Then and only then, I will weigh him, as I said, and give him back." Tywin studied him as one might study a pillar to judge whether the house will stand. "I could do worse," he said. "I have done worse. Here is my counter. The north is a nuisance, but it is too far and too cold to be worth burning. I will not recognize your crown, because I do not recognize inconvenience. I will recognize a truce and an end to hostilities between our houses, and I will return your daughter by spring with a marriage undone. In return, you will return my son, and you will guarantee safe passage to and from the Riverlands for my needful supply trains until this southern war is settled." "No," Ned said, "because sometimes the only thing to do is say no and wait to be asked why." Tywin's brows shifted a whisper. "Most men beg to explain their numbers." "Why?" "Because you ask me to let you keep sucking the marrow from the bones of the Riverlands while we sit quiet," Ned said. "Because you pretend your recognition is a food I must eat. Because my truce with you would cost me every other alliance I will need when the true winter comes. I will give you something else. I will return your son when I have my daughter, and I will not interfere with your southern war if your southern war does not walk north of the Red Fork. I will allow your trains to pass as far south as the Twins and no farther, marching by day with banners furled and men counted. You will pay for all you take at fair price in gold, and you will not burn a single field this harvest. The Riverlands need bread. I will not use their hunger for your convenience." Tywin stared at him and saw the iron that would not bend. Then he looked at Catelyn and saw that if he could take her measure too, he might feed on it. She met his eyes with a face that had washed births and bodies. He looked back at Ned and was quiet for the space of a dozen heartbeats, which is an age for men like him. "You will starve your own men to salve these river men's pride," he said. "I will starve if it makes my soul lighter," Ned said, and smiled a little, because he meant it and because it was new to feel humor when saying such a thing. "But I will not starve. Manderley has stuffed his cellars as if for a wedding feast that never ends. The North knows how to live lean." Tywin exhaled through his nose, a quiet sound like a beast adjusting in its den. "If I do this," he said, "you will be very sure you beat me. If you do this," Ned said, "I will be very sure we saved 2 children, and a few hundred harvests, and a winter's worth of bread." He leaned forward a hair. "Be certain of this instead, that I will keep your son alive and clean and whole. I will not cut him for trophies. You can sleep at night with that. Few men would be given that charity." His mouth tightened. Tywin Lannister loved being told he would sleep. It reminded him others did not. He looked down at his hands as if they were hands belonging to a man he wanted to admire. "Very well," he said. "We have an understanding. I will need your word that the boy will be returned in good order." "You have it," Ned said. "You may have it in writing if you wish, but my word is better than my ink." They signed their names on a parchment that pretended it was a treaty and was in truth a ceasefire between 2 men who saw the world as a piece of work. Jaime Lannister was returned to his father in 1 week, couriered in a way that did not invite stories, and Sansa Stark rode out of the city in a carriage with half a dozen ladies as if going to a wedding. She sang little songs under her breath because her hands had to do something. Cersei watched from a window and smiled as if she had lost nothing. 4 queens are trained to turn loss into posture. Joffrey threw knives into a door until one stuck, and his laughter when he achieved it was pure and simple and wrong. Sansa came to Riverrun and then to Winterfell through the slow dripping of spring, eyes older and the line of her jaw a little harder. Arya met her in the yard, hair hacked like a boy's, and the sisters looked at one another as if at mirrors made in bad glass. Then Sansa's mouth broke, and the sound she made was something only a few people will ever hear and understand. Their bodies remembered before their minds did. They tangled together like roots in old dirt and did not let go for a long time. Ned stood with his hand on Catelyn's shoulder and looked at the sky and thought he had never known the color of it before. The north settled into a shape that looked almost peaceful if you did not consider all the edges. Men counted their grain and their arrows. The Manderley fleet chased away reavers and sank two that dared to come too near White Harbor. The Ironborn took Bear Island for a fortnight and were driven into the sea by women who fought as if the life in their hands tasted better than anything anyone could offer them. The Boltons kept their knives in their sheaths and smiled, and Ned kept eyes on them anyway because it is a kind of sin to be surprised by men who tell you what they are from the beginning. Beyond the wall, snow fell in new ways. Benjen Stark did not come back, and Jon stopped expecting him to come around the next bend. He led his men out and brought them back more often than not. He learned that victory is sometimes simply that arithmetic, more home than gone. He met a girl with hair the color of the inside of a chestnut and eyes like sky above snowfields, and he learned that a man can hold two truths at once, that vows are bones and that warmth is a kind of God. He wrote to Ned about hard things and about small, good ones, and Ned wrote back with words that did not lie and did not show his worry too plainly. He sent more men to the wall than tradition would have called for and more food than people considered reasonable. He made the North a partner to the Watch in a way it had not been in living memory. He knew why. He had no intention of saying why out loud to anyone. He went sometimes to the Godswood and knelt, not because he expected answers but because the silence there is a talking silence. The heart tree's face was old and new, and the red of its leaves was redder than blood in winter snow. He spoke of debt. He spoke of promises made to dead women and living children. He spoke of kingship as if it were a weight he wore wrapped at his waist, pulling him to the earth in a way that was both burden and safety. He asked, when he let himself, for the chance to make one fewer mistake than the next man. Catelyn came and sat beside him sometimes and did not ask what he said because she listened and because listening is a greater gift than interrogation. She spoke of her father's slow passing and of the way the river took on the light at dusk as if it knew how to be generous. She spoke of the girls who were speaking to each other like people and not like versions of themselves. She spoke of Robb's eagerness and of the way men looked at him differently now, as if he had been opened by something only he could feel. She spoke of Theon and his place at the table, of Maester Luwin's cough, of Bran and Rickon's quarrels about dogs that were too big and too wild to quarrel about. She spoke of small things until they grew into the only things that mattered when the world becomes too large. He sent riders to the Barrow King's mounds not because he believed in ghosts but because he respected old terrors. He asked men to light fires at the corners of fields when the first frost came and to speak certain words over their plows. He stockpiled lamp oil and onions. He did not tell anyone that he woke from dreams of blue eyes in dark places with his heart an old drum. He did not tell anyone that sometimes, in the quiet between responsibilities, he and the memory of a sister spoke in the only language they had left. The South, golden-hearted and breaking, continued to burn a little and then smolder. Stannis learned to make allies without loving them and to make enemies without needing to hate them. The Tyrell Queen smiled out of years that would, in other stories, have been kinder. The Lannisters learned to count how many times you could pull something toward you before it snapped. Littlefinger grew richer on the weight of all these transactions, and Varys continued to move things like a man adjusting shutters against an oncoming storm. All of it seemed far and stupid until the ravens began coming north with stories of a different cold. It started as tales of lost men, then of fires gone out in a manner that suggested no human hand had simply forgotten, then of a village kept warm by a single hearth because the other wood would not catch. Then of sounds at night that made good dogs hide their heads and whine because sound sometimes tells truth without needing proof. Jon sent a letter written as if his ink had thickened. There was a single line in it that mattered more than all the rest. Send men with axes. Send men who have seen winter. Ned called his council and did not bother to play at fearlessness. We are done with southern games, he said. We are done with treaty and truce and carrying water for men who will never thank us for it. The next war is older. We will hold the neck. We will fill Moat Cailin with more men than it has seen since the world was green. We will send the second sons and third sons with strong backs to the wall with a kiss and a bag of oats to carry, and we will tell them they do in honor. We will send the old men to teach them how to be cold and not die. Robb grinned then, wolf bright and young, and for a heartbeat Ned saw him as a boy again with snow melted on his collar and a grin sewn to his face. Winter is ours, Robb said, half jest, half boast. Winter is no one's, Ned said, but we have lived with it longer than most. That is something. He went himself at last, because there are some places that a king cannot send someone else. He left Catelyn to hold Winterfell, and he kissed his daughters and told his youngest sons they must mind their mother and their maester and any dog that looks smarter than they are. He took with him men he trusted and men he wanted to learn how to trust. He took Theon because Theon needed to see a world in which battles were not won by hits in a bed. He took a file of Manderly men because they knew ships and snow in equal measure. He took the silence of his own thoughts and found it filled with all the voices he had ever loved. They rode north until men began to mistake the sky for the ground and vice versa. They reached the wall and it rose like a decision. Jon met him at the gate with eyes that had learned a great deal and had not yet learned how to keep from showing it. They embraced like men who had not always agreed and loved each other anyway. They walked the ramparts and looked out over the forest that was not a forest but a thing older than tree and terrors younger than gods. There are shapes, Jon said quietly, certain that the wind would keep his words from being stolen. There are laws that are not our laws. They do not care about kings. They never have, Ned said. I will hold them, Jon said. He did not make it boast, he made it vow. I will hold them as long as I can. I will ask for men and take boys and make them men fast. I will send to the mountain clans for their little gods and their big axes. I will speak to wild men and treat with them because men with cold in their bones understand one another. Do that, Ned said, and we will stand behind you not like a wall, but like the earth beyond it. If you fall, we will catch the thing that tries to run past. Jon turned his face to the north where the stars looked sharper. I will not fall, he said. Not while there is breath. Not while there is wood to burn. Not while there is a dog who will stand beside me. They did not say the other thing because other things had been said. Ned went down the steps and back to the fire where men he had known since boyhood sat with men he had not known until this morning. He watched them eat and trade stories. He watched a boy create a laugh on his lips that had not been there when he arrived. He closed his eyes and could smell pine resin and stew and old leather and the particular spice of hope. He had wanted once to set everything right. He knew now that men do not set the world right. They prop pieces of it until the wind changes. He had called himself king because men needed a thing to rally to. He would wear it as long as he had to. If the world allowed, he would hang it on a peg later and go back to being a man who walked in his godswood and taught his sons the proper way to clean a blade. He would be content with that. In the meantime, he would keep promises to the living and to the dead. At dawn, he rose with frost in his beard and went out to piss in the snow, and the stars above him were like nails hammered into dark. He laughed, low, at himself and at all of them. Men who believed they could do anything other than keep each other warm in a dark that does not care what you call yourself. The laugh fogged in the air and vanished, and he felt, for a heartbeat, lighter. They returned to Winterfell ahead of a cloud bank the size of a mountain. He knew what it meant without asking anyone. There would be months soon when the only sound a man would hear would be the creak of his own house and the whimpering of the wind. There would be fields where children would forget what green looks like. There would be good women buried under drifts and kind men lost at the edge of their own doorstep. That is the shape of it. The North has always known. He had declared independence because he could not be judge and hostage both. He would keep it not because crowns please the ego but because the rules of distance protect a people who have more winter than the rest. Let the South play and burn and sing their songs. The wolves would do what they had always done, hunt, share, endure. Catelyn was waiting at the gate, cloak wrapped about her and hair blown loose as if she were a girl. He went to her as if thaw itself lay in her smile. She asked him nothing. He told her nothing that mattered to anyone but them. The girls were within. Sansa sewing something that would not be lovely but would be sturdy. Arya sweating at the practice yard where she had bullied a guard into letting her balance on a fence post because she liked the feeling of falling and not falling. Robb had a map spread and was arguing kindly with Galbart about a matter that would never be solved by argument and must be solved by the first man to go see with his own eyes. Bran and Rickon were playing at being kings and wolves and men who were not either, which is to say they were being boys. Ned stood in his own hall and felt for a moment like a man who had come home to some place he had never left. He closed his eyes. He opened them. The firelight threw orange up to the beams. Somewhere a woman laughed. Somewhere a child cried and was hushed. Somewhere wind tried a door and failed. He went to his desk and took up pen and ink once more, and he wrote to Stannis with respect and to the Tyrell boy with the kind of courts. Why that keeps men from being foolish, and to the Iron Islands with a threat wrapped in a promise. You will find our coast less soft than you remember. He wrote to Jon and told him where the wolves had denayed this year. He wrote to the Mormonts and said the ship with olive oil had been sighted. He wrote to the clans and said the old songs would be sung at midwinter with carved bowls brought out and full. He wrote to Sansa and told her a stupid joke about a shepherd and a goat because sometimes a girl needs a stupid joke more than an update about diplomatic ties. He placed the missives in order and sealed them until the wax scarred like a field after battle. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the house breathe. He thought of the men he had loved who were bones now and of the women he had loved who still lived, and he tried to make of that a prayer. The gods do not always understand men who think too hard. Perhaps the trees did. He did not need to be understood. He needed simply to be allowed to continue. The snow began that night in a quietness as profound as any benediction. Flakes fell fat, then fine, then in a soft gauze that made the world seem into itself. Arya went out to catch them on her tongue and came back in with a face that made Sansa laugh despite herself. Robb shouted for men to bring in the last of the stores, and someone swore when a barrel slipped, and no one got angry because every man knows what a knuckle feels like when split by cold. In the Godswood, the red leaves caught white like blood learning a new way to be. Ned Stark walked out into it and let it take him. He felt the touch of the season on his hair, in his beard, on the hands that had made so many choices. He did not know how all of it would come out. No man worth the name ever does. He knew only that he would do what winter people do. He would hold, he would chip, he would share. He would keep the door until his son came to hold it. He would be the king his people had needed when they called, and an old man in a chair by the fire when they no longer did. He would be a father who had not saved one girl and had saved her anyway in the only way he could, and the man who had brought another child home and told her nothing but the truth. The wind lifted and laid down again, as if measuring. The bridge over the stream in the Godswood creaked like a voice that has spoken a long time and will go on speaking. He put one foot forward and then the other, as men do, as kings do, as fathers do, as the dead would if they could. Above him, the sky pressed low as if to hear a secret. Below him, the earth took his weight as if this had been arranged long ago. He opened his mouth and let the cold in. Tasted like iron and like possibility. He smiled without anyone to see it and kept walking. Snow stitched itself across the courtyard in fine, tireless lines, and the first season's fall lay soft on spearpoint and lintel, disguising angles as gentler than they were. The yard bustled despite it, as northern yards must. Axes split and sang. Hounds tossed their faces into eddies and sneezed. Men and girls moved as if their bodies remembered old patterns from years their minds had not seen. The smell of pine pitch and cold iron wove through the smoke like a story told in a mother's voice. Sansa walked with a small basket on her arm, the weight light and homely with carrots and parsnips and little turnips still slick with their own earth. The servants would have done it. There were always hands, and the daughter of a king could keep hers clean, but the motion soothed something. She thought of King's Landing sometimes as you think of a fever after your body has cooled, with a residual shudder and a disbelief that it had ever been inside you. She dreamed, when she dreamed, of rooms where laughter cut men like knives and of sweet smells that turned sick in the throat. Then, in the morning, She wrapped her hair against the wind and went to the kitchens and stood by women whose faces were lined by usefulness. And she learned that onions can bring a man to tears as handily as cruelty, with better purpose. Arya found her by the hearth, where steam rolled off a cauldron and stamped the air with the perfume of meat and spice. She had 3 freckles dusted with soot on her cheek and a braid that had pulled itself apart in her running. She set a wooden spoon down with the carelessness of someone certain of forgiveness and grinned as if the world existed for this moment of finding her sister. "Come," she said. "Rodrik says I may ride the fence out by the south pasture if I keep my seat and do not break my neck, and I like to break neither." She made a show of being tired of waiting and only just stopped herself from bouncing. "You may bring your basket if you insist." "I brought it to give it away," Sansa said, mock somber. She reached to fix Arya's hair and then did not. The younger ducked like a colt and used to hands. Instead, she tied the basket on the little iron hook by the door and followed out into the cold. The day bit at her ears. It was a good bite. You know where you stand with winter weather. It does not say one thing and mean another. In the yard, Bran sat on the edge of a low stone wall and told Rickon a story about a man who changed into a hawk whenever he sneezed. Rickon howled with laughter and demanded the man go out into a storm to make himself a storm of birds, and Bran's mouth quirked. In that moment he looked more like his father than like himself, which is a thing that happens sometimes when boys begin to be made. Behind them, Osha leaned on a pike she carried as easily as if it were a walking stick. She watched the gate with the easy patience of someone who has known a different kind of hunger and would prefer not to meet it again. Her hair had a salt tangle to it, and her eyes had a shore's hardness. She met Sansa's gaze and nodded once. They had learned each other's outline. Yes, if not each other's depths. The day wound along its thread, as days do when you are lucky. Ned Stark held a brief court in the great hall where the fire stacked its warmth into ridges against the stone. He settled disputes over a fence line and a pig. He listened to a woman from a crofter's cottage who had 3 sons and a husband who was gone with the levy and a patch of rye that would not sprout. He ordered 2 sacks of grain to her house from the stores with quiet words and the crier's bell to be still about it. Wyman Manderly's steward spoke of salt fish and casks, and a priest from the White Knife who said the river had a new rock in its belly that was making boats sulk. Ned made the room laugh and then listen. He felt the crown then like a band that kept his thoughts from unspooling, and on better days he did not hate it. Afternoon, a horn at the east gate cut the light in 2. Heads turned as if pulled on string. Rodrik Castle came in from the snow with his mustaches iced and 2 riders with reeds woven into their cloaks and hair you could not see sellswords wearing. Behind them was a sled that moved as if it minded its own business, though from the care they took at the turns you could tell it bore something more than firewood. "From Greywater," Rodrik announced and stamped. "Reeds." The hall received Howland Reed like a tide pool receives a wave. No one made too much of it, and yet it changed the color of the water. He was not a large man, and he had a way of making his weight small too, as if apologizing for taking space among tall stone walls. But his eyes were the old green one sees in a marsh when the sun gets tangled there. He bent his knee to Ned, and when he stood, he clasped forearms and the tension at Ned's shoulders eased as it does when an old song begins, and you realize you remember the next line. "I have brought my children, with your leave," Reed said. The taller of the 2 stepped forward with the controlled grace of someone who knows the length of her own limbs. Mira's smile was quick and could be made of kindness or knife, and this one was the first. The boy with her was narrow as a reed shaft and looked at the room as if it were a pattern he meant to memorize. He met Bran's gaze and held it without embarrassment, which many grown men cannot do. "You are welcome," Ned said, and meant it. "If you had come in summer, I would have given you the lake to play in. In winter, I will give you soup and a dry shirt and stories." "We have our own stories," Jojen said with the seriousness of a boy who has learned too much too early. "They are made of dreams. Some are of snow. Some are of wolves." Arya laughed under her breath. "We have those," she said. They settled with soup and bread. Jojen's hands were so thin and careful around the bowl that Sansa wanted to wrap them in wool. He stared at the fire past the spoon as if it answered a question that had not been fully asked. Mira sat like someone whose feet are used to water moving under them and enjoyed the stability of stone. Osha watched the boy with a narrow, not unkind interest. Wildling folk know the shape of the world's strange children because they do not send them away to towers to be made into silent things. Later, in the Godswood, Bran closed his eyes at Jojen's bidding and breathed, in and out, until the sound of the wind seemed to come from inside him instead of out. The reeds made a soft speaking together high overhead. The pool wore its ring of ice with a certain dignity, like a lady old enough to carry herself without jewels. The heart tree bled down its face and kept its own counsel. Bran felt the shape of his body sit on cold wood. He felt something else that was not body and was not body stretch out as a dog will after sleeping, forepaws long, back arched. He smelled far, ice under moss, the musk of a stag, the stale winter of an empty place where men had once cooked and left stones ringed smoky. He felt, no, he saw, it was seeing without eyes, white along a far branch, and his heart kicked as if at a surprise at a window. It was a snow owl that turned its face, and he could count the little scallops where feather met bone. He flinched back into himself and blinked. The world was heavier for a breath, like waking with something on your chest. Jojen nodded as if the boy had said something clever, and Mira's grin was a knife again, but this time because she was glad for him. Bran felt his hands and rubbed his knuckles. I was in a bird, he said. Yes, Jojen said, as if naming the weather. You will be in more. Osha spat into the snow as if paying respect. So long as you come back with your head on straight, she said. I have seen boys who did not. Then you will help pull me back, Bran said, innocent and imperious. And Osha barked a laugh and shook her head and said that of course she would. Because sometimes children ask things as if they were kings and it turns out they are. News does not travel in the winter as quickly as in summer, but some messages are carried by the shape of men's mouths and the way horse hooves strike. The paper itself came by Raven. The ink scarred by the cold its scribe had endured, and Rodrik carried it like something that announced a death before it was read. Lady Donella Hornwood had sent it from a small keep whose chimney drew poorly. Her hand did not waver once. She begged, no, she demanded succor. The Dreadfort's bastard, that rough boy who smiled with all his teeth, was cutting her forests and stealing her men. He took cattle as if he had a right to milk and meat that were hers. She asked what she should have had without asking. Men and iron and the respect due to law. Roose denies, Rodrik said. He sends polite words that taste like old beeswax. Send more polite words and men with axes to the Hornwood forests, Ned said immediately. Send the Great John to stand at her gate and grin at all comers. Send tall-heart men to ride the boundary lines and make fences of horsehair that will sting if anyone tries to walk through. Send 2 judges who remember there is something older than parchment. He paused, and the pause was a gathering. And send for Roose Bolton to come to Winterfell and explain to me how he feeds a bastard who cannot count without raiding his neighbors. Roose came as men like him do, quiet as rot in a grain bin. His face held courtesy and something else that was not courtesy but could be mistaken for it at a glance. He bowed as if bowing were a private joke he told to himself. Of course, I would never condone my bastard's excesses, he said, language smooth as bone. He is not mine save by rumor and by his own insistence, and you know how children fancifully adopt noble fathers to make themselves, in their minds, more than what they are. Most men who claim children do so to place bread in mouths, Ned said, not to ensure the bread belongs to another household. Do you call him back with a whistle? Does he come? The boy is not a hound, Roose said, perhaps before considering the metaphor. His eyes did a small thing like swimming upward and settling. He hunts, as boys of his sort do. I will have him leashed. In the meantime, for the sake of peace, I will send a cart of flax and 24 spears to Lady Hornwood, and I will restrain my dogs from her cooks. Better to restrain your dogs from her woods, Catelyn said from the end of the table, without heat. I have found stew tastes better when the cooks have slept well. Roose's eyes did not move. As you will, my lady. As you will, my king. Ned did not like being called king by men who thought it a costume. He allowed the word to lie between them like snow on a stiff body and did not stoop to pick it up. "My steward will make a list of what you have promised," he said. "We are not children playing at market day. We will count." He leaned back and folded his hands. "And I will be asking after the bastard whatever name he prefers today. A man who wishes to be thought better born should begin by behaving better." Roos left like a whisper departing your ear, and in the yard, as if to remind the world it can still surprise in small ways, a messenger tumbled from his pony with a handful of letters and a grin that looked wrong on the face of a man who had ridden so hard. "There are fires on the far side of the wall," he said to Roderick, breath clouding. "And men with blue in them that is not blood. The watch asks for axes. They ask for grain more than for swords. They ask for men who will not run at screams." "They shall have them," Ned said, already standing. That night, he sat with Caitlin and the map of the north spread between them, the parchment's creases like rivers of their own. "Moat Cailin," he said, tapping. "We have stretched our bodies long. This is where the spine holds or breaks. We will put men there who understand patience and mud. Glover for the building, Reed for the ground, Umber for the noise. We will raise more than earthworks. We will raise the memory of being a people who do not step for a southern drum." Caitlin tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and counted places, not in numbers but in what she knew of them. "And Hornwood. I send Rob," he said, "with the Great John and with Theon if he will go, to give him a thing to be to himself. He knows the woods and the men. He will not be rash if he thinks his mother and sisters will call him foolish across the table if he is. He reminds me in that way of a boy I knew once." He smiled and did not say whose son that boy had been. "Do not be cruel to yourself," she murmured. She put her fingers over his on the map. "You do not get to keep all errors as your pets." He bent his head until his forehead touched the top of her knuckles. They stayed so a moment as the house breathed around them. Rob took the fence lines of Hornwood with the patience of a farmer and the suddenness of a wolf. The Great John laughed and called putrid names after men who fled, because men who run should have to carry laughter on their backs as well as fear. Theon ran the river edges with a dozen of the mountain clans at his heels and found caches where men had hidden wood and meat as if from winter itself. At a ford no one thought worth watching. They caught a pack of hard-eyed men with 6 cattle muzzled so as not to bellow. The leader had the sour smell of a man who has lived more often in other men's messes than in a bath, and he called himself Reek with a defiance that made the name worse. He smiled when Rob ordered him bound, the curl of it unpleasantly familiar. Theon leaned in and then drew back, as if he had smelled something he did not want to put a word to. "We should hang him now," he said. "We will not hang a man before we measure him," Rob answered, and the echo of his father in it brought 3 men's eyes to him. "We will see what he knows and whose meat he feeds on," he gestured. "Send him to Winterfell with 4, and let him be watched by one who does not sleep easy." They sent him under leather, bound to a sled. Osha volunteered to ride behind him with a spear across her lap and eyes everyone preferred to see pointed away. She said nothing at all to him for many miles. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing you can put in a man's ear. At the wall, the wind taught lessons that letters cannot carry. It bit cheeks until they bled and then froze the blood into a badge. It found seams in cloaks that had been thought tight, pressed through wood as if wood were paper. John stood on the parapet with his hands bitten into the stone until he could not feel whether they were fingers or frost. From the line of the forest, far off, the flames flickered when they should have roared and roared when they should have guttered, and men who had stood winters without counting them began to look at the horizon as if it were not the same horizon they had been living with all their lives. Mormont died that winter, not to an arrow or a sorcery, but to a night gone wrong in the old keep where the mice had always held tiny parliaments. He went down under a pile of bodies that did not know they had died, and he took 6 men with him who had not wanted to die yet at all. John drew his sword and burned his hands on the hilt. He learned then what he had only known as a story, that fire is as much a blade as steel, and that there are some fears you must walk through because stopping makes you smaller until you cannot be found again. They sent to Winterfell a letter that said little and spoke too much. Lord Mormont gone. cold in unkind shapes. Send axes. Send onions. Send oil. Jon's name sat under it without flourish. Ned read it twice and nodded to himself in the way of men who have just been told that the river they knew has decided to change its course. He ordered lamp oil from the stores until Wyman Manderley wrote back that his cellars looked indecent, and he laughed and then didn't. He sent carts filled with onions and old boots and blankets and heavier cloaks. He sent men with eyes that had watched storms and not blinked. He sent 2 coffins made with care, empty, because sometimes the dead need houses even if they cannot be fetched for them. And he went himself because he could not be the kind of king who watched another man count his sons. He left Caitlin with the house and the map and the crown, which she wore better in private than he did in public. He kissed Sansa, and she opened her mouth to say he should not go and closed it again to say nothing that would make going harder. He kissed Arya and told her not to make the stable boys cry by beating them at their own games. And she rolled her eyes and said she had never made anyone cry who had not deserved it. He kissed Bran and Rickon and told them to put snow in their boots only if they meant to go all the way and learn something. He told Theon he would speak a good word for him if necessary and a bad one if necessary, and Theon laughed his salt laugh and said he had stopped asking anyone to define him, and Ned said that, too, required definition. He set off with a retinue lean enough to move and thick enough to matter, and the dogs ran out with them as if the north itself had grown 4 legs. Gates opened to him as they will open to a man carrying his own winter with him. At Queen's Crown, he stood on the frozen raising and looked north until his eyes watered and did not pretend to himself that he was only looking for weather. He crossed paths with a band of free folk who had tried to come through the neck and had been turned aside by water and reeds that rebelled against feet. He made a choice there that history would decide whether to call brave or foolish, though he did not believe in history's competence. He let them pass, with their ragged children and their pride, under spears held upright and not slantwise. Men who freeze on my doorstep shame me, he said to the men who had wanted to count coup instead of heads. We will not be so rich that we can afford shame. The wildlings looked at him as if he had offered a meal that might have poison but might not, and they took it because hunger sometimes swallows suspicion. Their leader, an older woman with teeth like grave markers and eyes that had seen more winters than he had fingers to count, spat to the side and said, "You're softer than your name." "I am harder," he said, and she approved of the answer because, in a cold place, paradox sometimes tells the truth better than pretended simplicity. At Castle Black, Jon stood with cheeks chapped and eyes bright from cold and something else. They embraced like men who had learned to love each other under pressure and not under ease. They spoke of fire and wood and nights that did not feel like nights because the dark had taken on a weight. They spoke of numbers as if numbers were bodies to be moved. They spoke of the free folk beyond the wall as men speak of neighbors who have suddenly shown up asking to borrow not sugar but shelter. They spoke and then they did not speak because sometimes the thing a father has to give a son is a silent place in which to breathe and not feel judged. Stannis Baratheon came after 2 mornings with a sky that ate color and a fleet that had unlearned city water. He looked like stone set upright and wore his kinghood like armor he did not know how to take off. The Red Woman came with him, fire singing around her the way frost does around certain trees when it is very cold, and the men muttered and crossed themselves in manners they thought private. Davos Seaworth stood at his shoulder with fisherman's eyes and a knight's stubbornness and met Ned as you meet a tide that will not be ordered and must be respected. "You hold these lands in rebellion," Stannis said, for he always began where the law began and then asked if the law were enough. "I hold these lands in necessity," Ned returned, and was not bothered by the word rebellion when applied by men who had never heard a snow house shift its weight under the wind. "That necessity will not be dismissed by force from the south. My men would die quickly, yours would die slowly. Neither death would feed anyone." Davos' mouth did a little thing that said he appreciated a barnyard of sense. Stannis' jaw tightened as if a stone had been placed there, and he refused to let it be seen as heavy. "I am king. In the south," Ned said, not unkindly. "Here I am a keeper of a hearth large enough to warm whole peoples. You have a war, I have a winter. They are different beasts. We can make room for both of them around the fire if you can let the lesser ferocity yield to the greater." He looked at the Red Woman, who regarded him as if he were a piece in a game she had already played. "I do not burn gods," he added, quiet. "Not even false ones, not even yours." "It is not mine," she said, and smiled without showing her teeth. "It is, and it is not." Her eyes slid to John, and the boy felt it as if someone had walked across his grave. "There is a sword here somewhere that remembers light. Steel remembers what men do with it," Ned said. "My sword remembers heads and walls. I suspect it is tired." They made an agreement that Stannis would not call a man traitor whose dogs did not eat at his table. Stannis pressed only as far as the words would bear, which is always farther than men who love comfort think, and not as far as men who love law fear. He signed with a hand that shook only because of cold. Davos came to Ned later with a rough laugh and half a smile and said, "You have a way with hard things, my lord. You make them sound like stone and like bread." Ned liked him immediately and thought that if there were more men like him, the world would not require so many kings. They faced a night such as the Wall had not seen since memory learned to make itself old. The aurora over the far pines did not move like color but like muscle. The sounds that rose out there were wrong, as if someone were playing an instrument with strings made of nerves. When they came quietly at first, as frost comes through a poor roof. Then all at once, the sky took on a sheen as if it were thin ice underfoot, and the dead moved like a rumor of a tide. Jon learned that orders spoken low do better work than orders shouted. He learned that a man will run faster toward flame than away from a scream if the flame is where his brothers stand. He learned that there are places a boy must step, and all the stepping before will not be practice enough, and he stepped anyway. They fired pitch with the care of priests who know the names of their gods. They brought down ladders, and when men climbing them did not notice their limbs were broken, they taught their hands to be cruel. They used words and oil and axes, and sometimes only their bodies. Stannis men, many of them, faltered at first because the cold here had a personality they had not met. Then they steadied because their king did not bend, and because the Red Woman walked the parapet humming a tune that made some men comfortable and some men afraid, and you cannot tell from the outside which is which. They saw them then, not many, among the press of the dead, like notes written in a hand too careful for their surroundings. The pale ones who seemed to lean more than walk, whose eyes took the light in and made a mockery of it. When one came near the foot of the steps where Ned stood, the air turned harsh in his lungs. He drew ice with a motion he had been practicing his whole life and had not known his life was only practice. The weight of the big blade was, for once, no burden. He swung not wildly but cleanly, like a man cutting the rope of a bell. When metal met cold beyond cold, the notes shrieked and then stopped like glass when it is struck properly. The thing shattered along a line he could not see, more like frost melting under sun than like a man dying. He had no breath to spare for wonder. He chopped at another and then another, and behind him men shouted names that were not prayers but were old and in their mouths made into prayers anyway. A shape came lurching up the stairs toward Jon, its gait wrong in a way his mind tried to fix as he watched and could not. It was a man once. It had been a man he had wanted to see, had dreamed he would see, in different shape. Benjen Stark's hair still clung to the skull like horsehair to plaster. The eyes were moons. The mouth had a droop that was familiar. For a moment Jon's heart did a thing that made the world smaller and then larger. He called his uncle's name because sometimes you call the name because the sound in your mouth is all you have left of a person. The thing did not answer, and perhaps that was mercy. Jon lifted his torch high and shoved it forward into the lungs that had once forced laughter at a boy's expense. The creature staggered toward him, not away, as fire took what was left. He put the torch deeper, and it fell, and when it stopped moving, only then did he let his breath drop into his body again. He did not cry. Later, perhaps. He did not apologize to anyone. He spoke two words that only the wind heard. "I know." At dawn, the field was a memory of violence. The snow lay black where it had been trampled and ran with slush where flame had liquefied it. Men had lost fingers to frost and tears to their own faces. They counted. They did not sing. They made jokes, which is how some men build a ferry over grief. Stannis stood looking into the trees like a man trying to see the first syllable of a sentence that will last a very long time. The Red Woman smiled her small smile and said, to no one and to someone. The night has teeth, but so does the day. Ned felt the weight of his bones more that morning than he had on other mornings. He knew something had been marked out and would have to be followed. Kingship is a trail, not a throne. He went to John and put his hand on the boy's shoulder hard enough that John would remember the feeling and not the words. "We will need to make room," he said simply, "for the free folk, for the ones who are not folk any longer to be ended, for fear to sit in the room and be treated kindly so it does not grow claws." John nodded. His face looked like a map of a hard country and a country a man might come to love. "I can do one thing before breakfast," he said in a voice that was half weary and half wry. "And then the next before dinner. That is all any of us can do," Ned said. "The men who say otherwise are selling something. They made the wall into not just a border but a gate." Mance Rayder came under a piece of rag that had once been a banner and looked at them with the confidence of a man who has learned that trouble is a place rather than an event. He wore a fool's smile to make men underestimate him, which is a dangerous habit, but he wore it well. Tormund Giantsbane laughed so loudly the snow shook off a nearby sill, and he called Ned a skinny bird and John a pup with a good bite. The women with them stood with their spears planted and their looks unplanted. The children made nests in the corners with whatever cloth they were given and slept with mouths open like otters. "We come for the same reason tradition says you should turn us away," Mance told Ned, quiet when they sat away from other ears. "Because we love this land and cannot stop loving it even when it becomes a thing that means to eat us. We will fight with you or without you, but I prefer to choose my neighbors." "Neighbors burn neighbors' houses," Ned said, "but they also borrow salt and return it twice over. We will have those rules if we are to live next to one another and not die with our hands on each other's mouths to keep from screaming at night." He held Mance's gaze like a thing that must be held firmly to be useful. "Your people will come through. You will lay down iron and bring only bone. We will measure each man and woman by their hands and not their old stories. Those who cannot live without stealing will not live here. Those who cannot live without singing, we will make room for at the table. If you send raiders into the rills to take a fisherman's catch, I will take your singer and make him sing to no one in a cell. If you keep to the rules we all hate, I will put meat on your spit when I put it on mine." Mance laughed softly, as you laugh when you meet a man whose reputation is true in a way that makes you forget to be disappointed. "King," he said, and made the word a good one. In the south, the reach of Tywin's quiet reached fewer miles than it preferred to reach and more than any decent man would want it to. Joffrey grew into his cruelty as a boy will grow into a coat his mother says he will fit in next year. The Tyrell girl wore roses like armor and hid knives among petals. Men with softer hands than northern men argued about whether the North's independence should be recognized and then were distracted by a tourney, because men who do not intend to carry winter on their backs prefer to carry pageants. There were rumors of a royal wedding where a king turned purple and choked on the hand of his own sins. There were rumors of a dwarf prince fleeing in a ship with a woman who loved him only half as much as he deserved or twice as much. There were rumors of a lord slain by his own blood in a privy that stank as all privies stink, an ignoble end for a man who thought nobility could be married to any act provided the house sigil hung nearby. The North watched the rumors crawl up and die against the frost on their windows and turned back to their own porridge and their own nettle beer. The Iron Islands did as the Iron Islands always do. They counted other men's wealth and called it their destiny. Balon Greyjoy's bones went to the rocks in a storm that was called an accident by those who wished and a murder by those who did not wish. A brother blew home like a gull who had learned to like carrion, and men with salt behind their teeth held a kingsmoot and raised him as a kind of lit torch. Euron crows I spoke of dragons and other nonsense with the confidence of a man who makes sense irrelevant by force of voice. His sister Asha smiled with her mouth and not her eyes and did arithmetic no one else in that cove wished to do. Theon listened to a raven's report with a face that revealed and then walled. "I should go," he said to Ned, abrupt as a knot pulled tight. "I should speak, at least. It may do nothing. It may do something. Or it may be that I only want to see my father's house and spit into its fire one last time." "You do not belong there," Ned said gently. "I do not belong anywhere," Theon countered, and then looked at Sansa. who was sitting in the window seat with a bit of mending. Except, perhaps here. His smile tilted. Even dogs from the south can learn to like snow. Dogs from the south like hearths more than snow, Sansa said, not looking up, and Theon laughed and bowed to her and then did not bow, and something in his face made her interested in him for the first time as something other than a danger or a joke. They sent Theon not because he would be safe, but because he might make a sliver of difference in a place where difference was a hard currency. He went with 2 ships out of White Harbor and a ribbon of Manderley green at the stern, and he carried a letter from Ned that said nothing of honor and much of nets and coasts and the ways men live when they stop pretending they hold all the keys to all the doors. He came back thinner and with a scar across his shoulder like a rope burn and a look in his eye that was not nothing. "Your crows I will come," he said. "Not for you first, for White Harbor, for fat, for songs, and then for anything that glitters. My sister is no fool and she will not be his ally without price. But price will be paid." Wyman Manderley snorted and patted his own belly as if it were a vault he would not let be cracked. "Let him come," he said. "We have fires that eat wood and men who light them with a laugh. My ships know the rocks better than any man who thinks throwing axes makes a sailor." Then he stopped smiling. "But if he comes with sorcery, that is different. I will pray to anything you like you point me toward." "Pray to your masts," Ned said. "Pray to your ropes. Pray to the men who tie them well. Pray to white seas. Pray to the fish. If there is anyone else who likes your voice, let them hear it too. But do not forget the first prayers." Wyman nodded, sober as a priest. Sansa's hands learned the weight of a key ring. She learned how to read an inventory and measure a face. She spent an afternoon with Gage in the kitchen doing nothing that looked lick. Ruling and learned more about ruling in those hours than some men learn in years. She sat with a line of petty folk until her eyes blurred and smiled at babies as if they had been brought to her as gifts. She wrote letters to women in houses along the White Knife asking not for favors but for information. Who has hunger, who has anger, who has a son grown wild on too much freedom, who has a husband who stares out a window too long. She realized at once that she had learned more in King's Landing than dresses, and that knowledge can be turned so that it does not bite you. Sometimes she walked up onto the walls and stood with her cloak pressed around her and let the cold sweep her clean the way silk will cling to a woman's arm when she pulls it. She breathed and thought of nothing at all, and the relief of it felt like stealing bread. Arya made a friend of the smith, Micken's boy who had hands shaped by hammers and a sly, nervous laugh. They fenced in the corridor between storeroom and buttery when no one watched, and when Roderick caught them once, he only threatened and then winked because sometimes you must let a girl do what boys do if you want her to live through spring. She went out with the hunters and learned the sound a hare makes when an owl takes it, and she did not pretend it was anything other than a small sorrow. She ran with the wolf and the wolf ran with her, in the snow and sometimes not in the snow, and no one asked because some men know what questions are safe to place in a house and what questions are better kept in your pocket. Bran's dreams grew antlered and wide. He saw roots under roads and the faces of men who had slept in the snow and not woken, their breath still a frost above their lips. He saw a tree with a wound not healed, and he reached, and Mira shook him hard to keep him from sliding down a place that would take him whole. He learned restraint, which is the hardest skill for any creature with a new power. He learned a trick with a raven that let him see over the rise of the world. He learned, one morning, sitting with Jojen in the cold with their breath between them like a small fire, that there are things you will always be too young for until the moment you are not, and that moment will feel like an insult and like a gift. The bastard from the Dreadfort escaped, as such men often do when men tire of guarding them. The slowness with which the guard's story was told tasted of guilt in the mouth. Osha snarled and went out alone and came back with hair full of ice and a scrap of cloth that smelled of the kennel. Roose came before he was called and slid a hand across the table as if smoothing tart dough. "I cannot be held responsible for a dog you refuse to keep tethered," he said mildly. "I can hold you responsible for raising it to bite," Ned said. He sent riders to Hornwood in number, and he sent a letter to the Riswells and Dustons reminding them that a wolf is not the only animal that hunts in the night. He told Catelyn, in private, that he had never much believed in vengeance as a strategy, but sometimes a man must teach another that the cost of a deed will be higher than the prize. He began to make a list in his head of bolts of canvas and coils of rope, and how long fire lives in wood and how long hate lives in a man. He did not say anything out loud about flaying, because some words curse a room more than fire will. The Hornwood men came in spring with banners dirty but unbowed. Lady Donella died in the winter, not at a knife point but caught in a cruel pragmatism she would not have had to contemplate if weathers and men were better. Ned gathered her household and made of their grief a line of law. He did not let the lords devour her lands like wolves at a birth bed. He said a Hornwood cousin no man would call handsome, but all men would call steady to keep the forests and the mills, and he charged the great John with loving the boy like a father, which in that house meant cuffing him when he deserved it and drinking with him when he needed it. Euron came as Theon had said, as a stain on a horizon and a scream in men's mouths. His ships moved as if they knew the water better than fishermen, which is sorcery enough for any coast. White Harbor found its sea legs in a single day and a single night. Wyman's banners cracked and screamed as if the cloth itself had things to say. Fires lit the water not in lines but in braids, as Ned had insisted they be laid. The pattern a man cannot learn to skirt if he has not seen it before. The first of the Crow's Eyes longships slid into the trap like a fish to bait because pride makes a fisherman of fools. The second turned and caught fire from the first because rope loves rope and fire loves both. In the morning, the harbor smelled of cooked wood and of the thick, ugly oil of a seabird's feather broken open. On the quay, Wyman put his hand on Theon's shoulder as if to steady him and said, "I did not pray, my boy. I counted. Felt like the same thing." Crows came in flocks to Castle Black as if called to their own funerals and learned new jokes at the fires. Humor that pushed against fear in ways that made breathing easier. The wildlings built cook fires in rings the like of which had not been seen on that side of the wall. Children climbed stairs laughing and stopped at the top as if the view were a blow to the stomach, and then they laughed again because children will. The watch began to look like a thing men could love again. John walked among them with a face that did not soften but wore kindness like a hidden coin. He met with Stannis often enough to be exhausted by the man's squareness and to be cheered by his clarity. He met with Melisandre rarely and always in places where there was a window and the possibility of wind. He wrote to Ned to ask for knitters to send mittens in quantities comical to consider, and Ned sent them because hearts and fingers freeze for the same reasons. Mare did not come. It paused like a guest reconsidering a visit and then wandered away. The snows lay longer. The crops hugged close to the ground. Men grew careful where once they had been cruel. Sansa sat a boy in her solar with a stolen turnip in his lap and suggested gently that if he intended to steal, he choose something less obvious than a round root under a tunic. He began to cry because kindness is sometimes too heavy for a child's ribs. She fed him anyway. She spoke afterward with his mother about work and the endlessness of it. She knotted together 3 women's small grudges over a borrowed dress and a borrowed husband and made of them a rope with which they could pull something for the village. Arya took a skinning knife away from a man who was too drunk to hold it properly, and she gave it back to him sober the next day with a remark about the steadiness of hands that made him look at her as if she were a problem he might begin to solve. Bran sent a bird over Moat Cailin and saw men hauling stones and heard, without hearing, songs older than the lords who now pretended they had invented the place. He sent his mind into a wolf and smelled the iron of men who came from far and the scent of fear that makes meat taste wrong. He learned to come back before the meat smelled too strongly. Jojen grew paler and his eyes grew larger and Mira's hands grew stronger and more practical. And they made a unit as some siblings do when the world asks something of them it has no right to ask. Ned wrote to Stannis when the rumor of royal deaths reached even through the frost and did not frame it in politics and did not pretend grief he did not feel. He said only, "The South eats itself as it does. We will keep our wall and our gate." Stannis wrote back in a hand as blunt as his jaw, "The law remains. We will hold where we are not loved because we are needed." Davos sent a note tucked in like an extra fish, telling a joke about onions and fingers that made Ned's mouth twitch and Theon laugh aloud. When men begin to speak of spring with their voices lowered, the world is already changed. The North recalibrated itself not around banners but around hearths. Wyman Manderley made soup that would have fed an army and sent it in casks north as far as men could roll them. The Mormont women sent boiled wool to the wall and refused thanks. The great John taught 3 children a song with rude verses that made their mother blush and then pretend not to laugh when she did. Galbart Glover carved a new lintel for a house near Barrowton with hands that had broken bone and now made beauty, because hands learn. Ned walked the Godswood with his daughters and told them a story of a woman who unbraided her hair in the snow because she could not carry grief and braids at the same time. Sansa listened with a face like a candlelit window. Arya ran ahead and then ran back as if to measure the story's steps with her own. He did not tell them the part of the story where the woman believed she had made too many oaths and not enough amends. Some pieces of a tale are proper to tell only to trees. He sat at his desk and mended a strap himself rather than sending for a leatherworker because his hands remembered another life. He wrote letters that would be read by men who had stopped reading much. He signed his name in a way that satisfied no one who wanted the flourish of kingship and reassured everyone who wanted the steadiness of stone. He set his seal as if he were pressing a palm to a child's brow. He rose and looked out the window and saw the world, not as a legend, not as a map, but as a thing one could place one's feet upon and not be swallowed whole. And then he slept, not like a king, not like a lord bound to paperwork in high rooms, but like a man whose body had finally decided to forgive him for some small portion of what he had asked of it. The house breathed around him, and the snow thinned until the stars looked nearer, and if there were gods in the leaves above the pool, they were quiet, which may be the kindest thing the gods ever are. Spring came grudging and half-hearted, not a banner but a rumor. There was grass in corners men had forgotten to look at and buds like stitches on branches that had taken to sighing under snow. The free folk planted in odd ways that made northern farmers shake their heads and then nod because crops do not care whose mother taught you to set them so long as you speak to them with respect. Men who had cursed each other's houses and grandmothers the previous year traded seed and wives' recipes. At the wall, John taught boys from both sides of it to swing a sword and to build a fence, and he learned which lesson made a better man and when. Stannis brooded like a storm in a harbor, and perhaps that was useful. The Red Woman laughed once at something Davos said and looked surprised at herself. There was time then for a wedding, not the grand bargains that had turned blood sour and bread dry. A winter wedding in the hall with evergreen and bright cloth and laughter. Sansa did not go to the altar with a fry. She had not been made into a coin. She did not go to Wylis Manderly, who was kind and would have been careful with her heart and with her person, but who would have made of her laughter a thing he admired rather than learned. She went to no man then at all. There were other weddings. A Manderly cousin, red-cheeked and wide in the shoulder, took a girl from Widow's Watch who had had 2 offers turned resentfully down by her father because the men had no boats and therefore, in his mind, no purpose. An archer with wrists like cables and a laugh like summer rain took a baker's daughter whose hands were always dusted with flour, and the air filled with the smell of sugar and fat and new wool. The Banners looked down and wished they were birds. There were more nights like the one they had stood through at the wall, though none so bad until the year turned. Ned did not go for each. He did not pretend that his presence made fire burn hotter. He went when called and when his heart told him he must, and he sent men with better backs than his when his knees told him other things. He stood with John at places where Frost had made new rules and watched the boy turn into a man not in a crowd's praise but in the quiet between choices. He spoke to the wildlings when they were not called that, when they were only people with tired backs, and he learned jokes about crows that made him laugh for the first time in months and for that alone were worth hearing. He met with Roose Bolton again when a boy from Hornwood was found with fingers missing and a story that lied to itself out of fear. He did not accuse, he did not quell. He arranged a hunt, not for deer. He gave riders who had learned to hang bells on twine and tie them to fences so they would chime when men tried to pass without being seen. He made an example of 2 men who had thought a woman alone was a deer. He refused to make an example of a boy whose father had taught him the wrong words for love. He sent him to the wall with a letter to John that read, "Teach him what cold is, that he will not find warmth in cruelty." John wrote back a season later and said, "He cries sometimes but less. He smiles at dogs first now." This felt like victory. On a day in late thaw, Howland Reed came again and sat with Ned in a small room whose windows faced the least interesting corner of the yard. He said nothing for a long time, because men who have saved each other's lives do not need the useless part of speech. Finally, he put his palm down on the table as if he had something to nail there and could not find a hammer. "The dream with the tower has not left me," he said. She laughed. Then she coughed. "I wake with the smell of blood and flowers and the sound of a man who kept his promise until it broke him." Ned closed his eyes. "I am a poor man for secrets," he said very low. "I have gotten worse at carrying them. But I will carry this one to the end because not carrying it would chain another boy to a life not of his making." He looked out at nothing. "When this winter ends, if it ends, there will be room for truths. For now there is room for wood and meat and old gods and new babies and 5,000 small things that need small hands. Let us carry those." Howland nodded. "When the water goes down, it leaves silt on your doorstep. This is useful for planting. But you must remember it was a flood first. It is a dangerous kindness." They sat until the light crossed to the other side of the room, and then they went to their suppers and did not speak of it again. The year turned and turned again as years do when men are tired. If the songs ignore those years, it is because they do not know what to do with them. The songs will talk about the night on the wall when the king's sword shattered the cold and pretend that was the thing that mattered. Did matter. But so did a day when Sansa stitched a rent in a fisherwoman's net and thereby fed 6 people who did not know her name. So did the day when Arya, without being told, set a bowl on the step outside the kennels because she had seen a boy walking by with his eyes on the ground and knew he would not come in to ask. So did the day when Bran dreamed of a grove not far from Last Hearth where the frost held long and men had begun to die when they slept too long and sent Mira with a word that brought them into houses before their lungs forgot their jobs, and that was enough to keep the count low. So did the day when Theon stood at the harbor mouth at White Harbor and refused to let a ship with a lion pennant pass because he did not like the way she sat in the water, and Wyman later found 2 holds worth of iron pikes under boards where there should have been olives. Sometimes the important thing is done by a hand you would not have thought to bless. On a morning when the air felt like old paper and tore as you breathed it, a raven came from the east with a tag tied to his leg with silk finer than any rope a northern finger would ever knot. The letters said little and much, 3 dragons. A girl. A city that had not fallen in living memory had complained loudly in smoke and then fallen to its knees. Men came to the hall to hear the words and smiled and spat and argued and rubbed their hands and asked what it meant, because the world is larger than winter, always has been, even when we forget to look beyond our own horizon. "It means the game that eats the world grows teeth that chew farther away," Ned said, not drama but description. "We will keep our wall and our bread. We will make deals with men who have boats that go east when ice thins. We will meet whatever comes to our gate when it comes. We will not go to meet it with our house empty." He did not say that sometimes he dreamed of a girl with hair like a storm and eyes like jokes told a long way away. Dreams are like letters written to a place you cannot reach. The night the first true spring rain came, it hit the roofs as if it had been waiting a year to do so. Men came out in shirt sleeves and held their faces up like flowers, and women cursed because laundry was on the line and then laughed because who cares? Sansa lay awake and listened to the gutter and thought of how water teaches patience. Arya took off her shoes and ran and came back with feet red and happy from the cold. Bran dreamed of a great fish moving under an island the shape of a spear. Ned lay with Catelyn and counted her breaths like beads on a string. When the sun came up, the world looked newer without being kind. The gods would shone like a polished blade. The yard smelled of wet dog and wet leather and wet hope. Ned walked out with his hands in his sleeves and his collar up and inspected the ice where it clung to the north-facing stones. It would linger, of course. Ice always lingers. He touched it with his knuckles anyway and felt how it gave a little, how it had begun to turn to something a man could drink. He had done what he could. He would wake tomorrow and do a piece more. He would protect and he would cut and he would stand between the cold and the hearth and he would be foolish sometimes and he would be patient sometimes and he would fail and he would be forgiven, if not by gods, then by time. The North had declared itself independent not to be proud but to be practical, which is a kind of pride the South does not understand. It had held the line not because lines are pretty but because the world requires lines and men to keep them so children can sleep. He had cast his lot with winter and with those who do not pretend it does not come. He had, by simple acts and by some that were less simple, ensured that when the storm looked at the map of the world and placed its hand upon it, there would be a place that resisted, not with speeches, not with a glittering chair, but with walls and soup in hands, with dogs that slept warm and woke fierce, with wolves who understood kinship, with kings who understood the use of kneeling. And if one day the crown hung on its peg and someone else sat where he sat and told a child a story by the same fire, if that child put fat on their bones and laughed at the right places and did not learn the wrong lessons from the hard tales, perhaps that would be victory. Perhaps that would be all the victory any man has any right to ask. He looked across the yard to where Rob was showing a boy how to set his feet, and Arya was trying the move and failing and then trying again and failing better, and Sansa was telling two women that they could both be right if both agreed to be also wrong, and Bran was looking up at a bird that hung in the air without moving and perhaps was looking down, and Rickon had snow in his hair because some boys will always find winter even in spring, and Catelyn was watching all of them with a soft fierceness that was almost a prayer. Snow would fall again. Blood would be asked for, and coins and stubbornness. Kings die and cities blot themselves, and the sea tries to take what the land has made. Men like Tywin wear themselves toward bone and no one weeps, and men like Davos make jokes and no one thanks them properly, and women like Melisandre light fires and men stand too near and it matters, and women like Mira fix a strap and the world holds together another day and it matters. Children run and then do not run and both matter. Letters fly and sometimes find a hand and sometimes do not. A brother's shadow moves through a boy until one day the boy stands and the shadow rests. He stood a moment longer and then he moved, because the door of a house is like a promise. If it is to hold, someone must make sure it is properly barred each night and properly unbarred each morning. He went to see to it, his boots loud on stone, the sound an old comfort, the sound of a place that had not fallen and a people who had not forgotten how to make of hardship something other than ruin.